We are inherently wired for well-being. We all hold the keys to greater happiness, ease, and connection in our lives. However, we are not taught how to access these capabilities. Welcome to Wired for Well-Being, where we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. Because when you work with your nervous system instead of against it, life opens up with more compassion, freedom, and ease. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and for the last 40 plus years, I've been a practicing clinical psychologist. And I am joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Steve, how was your weekend?
It was great, Jeffrey. Thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here today.
Each week, we use questions from listeners like you as doorways to explore how we each can work with our nervous system. Because while our stories differ, all our nervous systems speak a shared language. In today's episode, we explore how to live with connection and purpose without feeling overwhelmed, even when the world feels too fast, demanding, and chaotic. Often we may find ourselves marching to the rhythm of others rather than our own. Here, we look at how our nervous system may feel safer if we match others' needs and rhythms. By the end of this episode, you'll see how from within regulation, things don't seem so difficult. So let's dive in. Steve, what do you have for us this week?
I have to say, Jeffrey, our anonymous caller this week really touched a deep spot in me, not only from his sensitivity and approach, like I could feel his energy really pouring through his voicemail. And what touched me is the tension that I can feel viscerally between the inner calm that he's looking for and the outer demands that he's feeling. So let's jump into this question and give you a chance to respond.
A wonderful day to you, Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein. I've been on the health and healing path for a long time. My question, as best as I could put it into words, is I've been navigating complex PTSD my whole life. And at times I can become severely fatigued. I really practice living my life in a more peaceful pace, a more regulated pace, a more slow pace, which honestly is really more healthy for my brain, my neurology, my body. And I'm wondering if you could share some insights, some guidance, some advice about, how to be in action towards your dreams, working in the world when our world is more dysregulated and anxious and stressed and overwhelmed than ever before. Me living a more peaceful pace of life, a more regulated, slower pace of life, it can be challenging to, really be a part of life in the world today because it's just moving so fast. So thank you, Jeffrey. I so appreciate you, and I'm so thankful that you have a podcast now. I just really feel your soul and your heart. Okay, bless you, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Well, I see what you mean. Our caller is very heart forward, right? There's something in his voice even that just gives me a sense that he's done a bit of work familiarizing himself with trying to work within a state of comfort in his nervous system. And I love the question also because I think that it expands to so many of us trying to find and honor our rhythm in today's world, whatever that is for us. But the first thing I think I would just like to say about this, Steve, is that Many in our listening audience may not quite understand what complex PTSD is or even what PTSD is. So, just as a real short description, PTSD stands for post traumatic stress disorder. And that's certainly something that anyone can have from an auto accident, being in any kind of traumatic and stressful situation. They can develop symptoms after the trauma. Therefore, it's called post traumatic stress disorder. Complex post traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, is refers to a kind of PTSD that happen from long periods of abuse or trauma versus a singular incident or just a few incidents. People who have suffered years long of abuse, neglect, trauma, feeling unsafe, uncared for, feeling that they were at risk. Um, these leave deep imprints on the nervous system and on our relational system. And so, one of the main differences, right, is that because complex PTSD often occurs in the form of familial or caregiving relationships or with significant others, uh, the sense of shame and lack of self worth is very, very big in folks like this. They feel very hurt and wounded to the core. And there's a lot of tendency for the nervous system for anyone with PTSD, but especially if someone has complex PTSD, there's a really high likelihood their nervous system is going to be uh, easily dysregulated, may spend a lot of time in dysregulation. And like our caller here talks about, he can get very stressed and then he can crash. He can go down below, tired, to a really place where he's just stuck in bed. At least that's how I'm imagining. So there's so many pieces here, Steve, about um, our caller and this dilemma that he points to.
Yeah, it's never an easy path with such a complex system. So, how is that complex PTSD that our caller is sharing? What is his nervous system doing with that, and how does that relate to him trying to resolve this tension between slowing down and the speeding up that he feels like he's being
Right,
asked to do?
right. Well, um, knowing that our caller has had a history of CPTSD means that we know that his nervous system has been significantly stressed and challenged from a young age, which means that in spite of all the knowledge he knows and all the things he has learned and maybe skills he's developed, his nervous system is still going to have a tendency to take just a little stimulus to send it into hmm, out of the window of tolerance, out of that zone where we can feel regulated and connected and maybe a little stressed. But if we climb above that into stress, we're really dysregulated. We're really stressing and worried and frightened or busy or overwhelmed, or we then crash and we go into that deep, disconnected, shutdown, collapse, disappearing, dissolving state where we don't have energy for self care. We don't have energy to get stuff done. We feel like just getting out of bed sometimes is too much. So, number one, living with those extremes in one's life, it's very painful. And that itself is very dysregulating. To jump up and down like that, which many folks do, is exhausting. And it's not a personality fault, it's not a personal lack. This is just a nervous system that, because of experience and because of genetics, has been trained to stay out of regulation and to stay on vigilance, high vigilance, or to jump into kind of a deep dissolve shutdown. Now, to our caller's credit, he is aware that neither of those paces really serves him well, that he finds stress very disorienting, and that not only that, but it's costly. After a period of high activation, high fight or flight, he then will drop down inevitably to that low energy, almost paralyzed shutdown space. So he's worked at trying to offer self-care, which is beautiful, by trying to be disciplined and boundaried about what kind of activation he exposes his nervous system to. And again, he's not wrong. Caller, you're absolutely correct that the world is in a crazy tizzy right now. Uh, it feels very chaotic and very fast paced and very anxious and very divisive. There's something that feels speeding up and intensifying of that. So your nervous system perception of that is accurate. What our caller, Steve, is also presenting us with, like you were saying, is this dilemma between how can I be me? How can I take care of my nervous system and brain that needs a slower, less chaotic, less overwhelming pace? And also, how can I be engaged, of service in the world? How can I be alive in the world, moving towards dreams or goals or whatever, but not get so swept up in it that my nervous system gets overwhelmed and then I have to shut down again?
Yeah, what occurs to me is like, what is my state? Where do I maybe normally default to? How does that relate to where I think I should be? How does that relate to how I think I should show up in the world? How does it relate to how the world is expecting me to show up? And it feels like just saying that, I can feel my own pressure to try to choose one of those lanes. And maybe like our caller, the lane that they may have chosen is, this is where I am. This feels comfortable to me, but the world is asking this of me. And what's the question in here? The question in here is maybe like, how do you navigate that? Like what we think we need to be versus where we might default to be.
That's a great question. And that brings us back in this particular caller's place to a bit about complex PTSD, which is that because the wounding and the trauma occur in relationship, often in familiar or familial relationships, familiar or familial relationships that um, we bring, if we have that in our background, we bring a burden of that into relationships. So, for example, people with nervous systems that had experienced CPTSD may find that they very easily want to be appeasing and agreeable and pleasant to others. They don't want to be negative or angry or demanding. And they have a really easy time trying to contour themselves to what other people might expect of them. So, in a sense, our nervous system is attuned to kind of push our own needs, desires, or thoughts away because what feels safer in that moment is maintaining the connection, the attachment. And so if I learned growing up that I have a very fragile attachment with folks, they could splinter at any minute and attack me or harm me, then I'm going to try to find ways to be the least upsetting as possible in a relationship, which means that I will follow someone else's lead. And while that may have been and probably was, if that's what happened to this caller, a brilliant solution in childhood, it no longer serves us quite as well in adulthood when we actually want to be ourselves, because that kind of means if you're used to joining other people in their states, then there's a part of you that when you join the world, that almost you feel like you expect you have to join the world, you have to join the frenzy and the pace and the rhythm of the world. And the truth is you don't. Children in families like this don't really learn that their nervous system really can be separate from someone else's nervous system because they're so profoundly influenced by their parents' moods, needs, their own histories of trauma, abuse, or whatever else is going on in your life, that it it just makes you believe that there's something bad about you. So often, especially with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, there is a deep sense of shame and lack that children, once they grow up to adults, hold, and that this sense of feeling kind of powerless and having the world impose itself on us is kind of projecting the past, what actually happened, to this present circumstance. In polyvagal terms, we talk about the concept of neuroception, our nervous system sensing the relative safety or danger in someone else or in an environment or in an action. And there is matched neuroception and mismatched, two types. Matched is when I perceive you as dangerous and you're dangerous. Mismatched is when I think that you're really, really dangerous, but you're not. Or I see you as really, really safe, but you're actually dangerous. That's mismatched. And it doesn't mean I'm crazy if I'm seeing you as dangerous when you're not. It means that you're reminding me, my nervous system, of some characteristic of someone that was dangerous to me at another time. And so I'm not making something up. I'm taking something that happened to me and applying it to this situation because there's just enough going on here in the way you talk or your accent or how you look that activates my nervous system to begin to see you as a potential threat.
How do we take that information, understanding there's a history of complex PTSD, understanding that a degree of match or mismatch neuroception may be happening? Like, how do we know where we need to act? Because I can start to see some perceived benefits, but also some perceived challenges to not being able to mobilize to act in the
Right,
world.
right. So, if we talk for a moment about the nervous system map, okay, that we have at the higher portion of this invisible map here I hold, is sympathetic activation, fight or flight, and freeze. And then we have the middle portion, the window of tolerance, the place where we can be in balance between defensive states of activation and defensive states of collapse and withdrawal. We're in this place where we're not really driven by a need to protect ourselves. We're actually more driven by the desire to connect. And depending upon where we are on that map, it tells us what kind of experience we're going to be having. And it also gives us some information about what kinds of practices to engage with to shift from a state of dysregulation back home towards a state of regulation. So, you were mentioning also something good, which is that if we spend a time in that shutdown state, it's not really good for us. Being overwhelmed and anxious isn't really good for us. Emotional states are supposed to be information. We're not necessarily supposed to live in them. And our nervous systems don't have an easy access to an off button. We haven't learned how to access yet. That's part of what you and I try to teach, is about how to find that off button. So in this case, we would want to help our caller get curious about what level of activation and energy they have. Because it seems to me, if I make up a story here, that our caller is seeing the world as a potential danger with its fastness and its speed. It's feeling in relationship to this imagined world or felt world that he is too weak or he can be blown away or sucked into the current and the rush of the world. And that could very well be that he's perceiving that that's actually sending him closer to that shutdown space. We don't usually feel that overwhelmed uh, if we're in regulation. If we start to feel like, oh, I don't feel like I'm a match for the world, we're going down below towards that low energy state where we collapse in our sense of what we think we're capable of. We begin to doubt our actions. We feel less clear. We feel less motivated. We feel more like withdrawing and retreating, giving ourselves reason why we shouldn't go out into that crazy world. So if you're noticing part of that's going on, that helps you identify that you're in another part of that energy level of low energy, of that collapse and shutdown, but not at the deep level that you get when you've really overextended yourself and then you're just unable to do anything. This is a lighter level of that low energy closing in or shutting down. It's another way of kind of cutting off from the energy that wants to move into the future. Here's something else I'll say. I would also encourage our caller to get curious about anger. Often, if we've had a history of CPTSD, we know or have ruled certain emotions in us to be dangerous, like neediness could have caused our caretakers to explode, or anger. So there's many folks I've worked with or spoken with who can do anxiety well, can do shame and despair and depression well, but they really have no comfortable relationship with getting angry. And what that means is that their nervous system is regarding anger as dangerous, so they have to detour it other places. But what that means in experience for our caller or anyone else who's doing this is that they also don't get to access some of the positive qualities of the energy of anger. Now, at the top level, it's rage, it's murderous rage. That's wanting to kill someone to fight for your life. But at much lower levels of that, it's the energy of giving us perseverance. It's the energy of what gets us to go outside and interact with the world, or imagine a project and then put the energy behind it to make it occur, make it happen. We need some access, some healthy access to some sympathetic energy, right? All states are healthy. Getting stuck in either sympathetic or shutdown isn't great for us, but we're going to visit them, and we need to know how they help us in daily life. Right. So anger doesn't just have to be a destructive force. Anger can be a constructive and creative force, depending upon the intensity you feel of it. So I would invite our caller to get curious about his relationship to anger. Is he comfortable with it? Does he find that he blocks it out, or feels ashamed instead of feeling angry, or feels angry at himself instead of angry at others? These are little ways of how the nervous system keeps us falling back on ourselves and kind of confusing us about, is it okay to feel what we feel? We shouldn't even feel what we're feeling. And of course, the truth is, whatever you're feeling is whatever you're feeling. You can argue about that all you want, but that's what you're feeling. And the nervous system doesn't really respond when we say, don't feel that way. It can't do anything with that. Steve, did I answer your question before about what to actually do in practice?
Yeah, you answered that question and you gave me like 4 more, but you also gave me a visual for our caller, and the as you were sharing about the 3 states, I really saw stairs, and our caller potentially on the lower part of the stairs of this 3-part system that you're talking about, and viewing that they need to get to the top of the stairs, this higher activation where outwardly the world can seem crazy and is crazy in many ways, is dysregulated in that high activation, and the fear of that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. But the reality is, you don't necessarily have to get into that space. If I'm understanding it, like you don't have to follow along in the craziness. You don't have to follow the dysregulation. You might need some of that energy to get something done or have motivation. The word that comes to mind is grit
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. But you don't necessarily need to view it as, I've got to make this jump, and this jump is uncomfortable, and my nervous system doesn't want to go here, and I'm not comfortable with some of these emotions. But maybe you actually don't have to land. You don't have to meet the world where the world is. Maybe
Right.
that's what I'm
And
trying
I
to
think that
express.
that's the truth. I think that a lot of us have not necessarily felt comfortable with being who we are. Mm, we often feel we should be different, better, including with our nervous system. It should be less reactive, more energized, whatever it is, right? And in this world, like, I think one of the gifts that we can offer it is to be authentic. And that means being us, not being what we think everybody else thinks we should be. And so for each of us, that also means honoring our rhythm, right? The rhythm of our life, right? Our, our caller is talking about, he's aware of a need and a comfort for a slower rhythm, and that the world in general seems to have a faster paced rhythm. And yes, if we're unconscious about this, we will undoubtedly be influenced by the pace and the energy of the world. But we also have this power, right? So just like a twig snaps near a watering hole in the jungle and 10,000 elk turn their head in a second to look towards the sound, alarm can pass instantaneously from mammal to mammal. And so that's what's happening in society, in the world today. But we also can send and receive signals of safety. We can send a welcome instead of a warning. We can, if we are somewhat regulated, somewhat present in ourselves in that moment, we can actually um, be a signature or an antenna for calm instead of for rush, an antenna for consideration and compassion instead of hatred or irritation or competition. We can bring qualities into the world by how we be that actually can shift the balance, because anger and fear and divisiveness are contagious, but compassion, slowing down, and being more connected are also contagious when enough people begin to connect and express in that way. So I think that going into this knowing that, hey, my nervous system tends to overreact, and I want to work on that. I want to work on bringing my nervous system back into my window of tolerance. I want to interact with the world, right? And have some access to fight or flight, but not get dysregulated with it. And especially not for months at a time that then just sends me to bed for months. But that's kind of an either or dynamic. Either I'm alone in my pace or I'm sucked into the world. And the third path that we're talking about here is actually relating to your nervous system so that your partner is in how you engage in the world. And so you listen to your nervous system when it tells you after like 3 days of doing some extra level of work, it goes, okay, you need to rest now. Or after a day, you need to rest now, instead of endlessly keeping yourself in that pace, even when you're not part of the world, when you're back at home, keeping your nervous system up and running. Again, if we've had trauma, dysregulation is so much part of our experience that we don't even notice it. Again, it's like fish in water. They don't notice water is different. All they've been exposed to. If all I've been in is mostly dysregulated a lot of my life, I'll find great ways of learning how to tolerate that. Not like it, but tolerate it.
I want to go back to one of my favorite words that you share that I'm trying to incorporate more and more in my life, and that's being curious. And what I hear here for our caller is that opportunity to be curious when they notice the world might be asking more than they have to give. And there's a choice point that I'm hearing of what do I have to give here? What do I have to do here? Do I have to join where the world is asking me to join? Or can I, if I understood you, like, can I choose to respond to this with compassion? And can I offer a different energy into this space? And I know you teach a lot about that. I'm wondering if you could maybe give us like a practical example of how that might look for our caller to get from the awareness that they have to maybe a place that feels maybe more aligned with where they
Right.
want to be.
A big and important practice is self-compassion. One of the reasons is that self-compassion is an antidote for the wiring of shame and self-judgment, which is a big piece of the process of what undermines us. And it's a nervous system piece. It's not necessarily a psychology piece. It's a nervous system piece. It's just part of shame. So learning and practicing self-compassion is a huge and impactful tool that people can gradually build. And anyone can build the capacity, though for many people it's challenging at first. If you spend time in the practice, it really pays off.
So give me like step one, Jeffrey. Step one, practicing self-compassion. Like what can I do right now as I'm listening to
Okay,
this
so
podcast?
first of all, one of the things about self compassion, an easy thing you can do in this moment, is just see what happens when you put a hand to your chest and your heart. Just put your hand to your heart. Let yourself make contact, and then allow your awareness just to simply linger at that points of contact between your hand contacting your heart region of your chest and your chest receiving the pressure and the warmth or coolness of your hand. Now, this is an act of kindness. Now, this does a couple of things. Number one, it tells the body that you're safer. Just the mere friendly contact. As we get a little regulated, it's easier for us to be kinder. So, first we get regulated just a little bit here. And then self-compassion means that we have compassion for the world and ourselves. So, I want to be part of this world. I want to be of service, or I want to give something that is helpful to what our world needs. How can I do that and be self-compassionate? What's the way that I could begin to imagine how I could participate in a way that doesn't feel draining or overwhelming? Can I imagine allowing my nervous system to actually move toward this, but keep some toes in regulation? Because maybe in the past, I've always gotten anxious when I've thought about having to do things in the world. And maybe right now I can be a little bit more willing to come back, even when I think about joining the world, to some regulation and some kindness.
Do you want to wrap this call up with any other final concluding thoughts?
Our caller's question, I'm sure, illuminates a lot of dynamics for any of our listeners who've had trauma or CPTSD. But for people who haven't, so many of us struggle with this felt existential struggle between who am I supposed to be when I grow? I'm an adult now. Who am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be what my parents wanted to be? The world expects me to be. I'm supposed to be, knowing where I am right now and feeling okay about it and moving forward optimistically. And the truth is, we don't feel that way very often. We often feel like I have to make a choice between being kind of loyal and protective of us and then stepping into things that may feel overwhelming or messy or painful or shameful or too costly. And I think that this again opens a third way, which is that we can respect our nervous system and we can engage in the world. We can be protective and also have boundaries and have openings, have some boundaries that we choose to be permeable and some that are impenetrable. That we can interact, but not have to fuse with the world. We can be kind and compassionate to others without swimming in their nervous system dysregulation or swimming in their pain or their rage or their chaos. And it is possible for us to find states of regulation because we weren't taught that. We're just left on the, to dry in the wind or to hang in the wind. It's about time that I think as a society, as culture, we begin to learn how to actually allow ourselves to soothe our nervous system and return to a place of more resource, more connection, more enlivened ability to be ourselves. So our caller kind of opens that dimension for us today, and I'm really appreciative of that. And I think that anyone who just wants an easy one moment practice of hand to chest and lengthening your exhales that are about twice as long as your inhale, doing those together is a way of helping you return fairly quickly, at least for a moment, to some sort of regulation. And from there, you will have access to different ways of thinking and responding to the issue.
Jeffrey, thank you for that reminder that we can find that choice point, because I immediately felt how empowering that was. gotten so many amazing questions in, and they keep coming in. And maybe you can let people know how to send their question in if they've got something on their heart or mind they want to ask.
If you're interested in sending a question, we'd love to hear from you. You can call our toll-free number, 866-357-5156. If for some reason you can't reach that exchange from an international number, feel free to send an audio recording by email. Or if you can't do an audio recording, just a typed email is fine. And send that to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And while you're there, if you would like to go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, you can find a link that will both take you to a free gift and also to the flagship program that is opening up registration right now, the 9-month program I do for intensive nervous system healing, a 9-month in-depth program that will really help you transform the way you live with and work with your own nervous system. There'll be a link there to take you and find out more about that program. Steve, it's always a pleasure. I always love doing this with you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's always a blast. I also want to invite people to subscribe or like or do any of the things on whatever platform you're watching on and help spread the word. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Bye for now.